Hey everybody, Soulless Reviews here, and on this cold winter day, yes I said winter because it's snowing outside, and it's 20 degrees, like holy shit, it is only November, slow the fuck down winter, we're going to be talking about Freddie Gibbs' newest album, Shadow of a Doubt. Now, Freddie Gibbs is a pretty casual dude. I mean, he didn't drop anything all that substantial. He made his big break in 2011 with Cold Day in Hell. Now, he's dropped music before that, but that was the album that really made people be like, oh, hey, there's a rapper that's actually decently talented. And while at the time I really wasn't aware of him dropping music, I did get around to listening to it, and it was a pretty decent project. It's kind of your basic average hood album, however, he does go further into explaining the themes he uses on the album, and it's a pretty solid project. And then from there, he's dropped like two other projects. That was 2011, so 12 and 13, he dropped two other projects. Nothing really broke through. I mean, Gibbs was just this hard guy who got an endorsement from Jeezy. He was just pretty casual. No one really saw him as anything all that special. Until early last year with his project Pinata. Holy hell was that a fucking good project. Not only was Gibbs being lyrically conscious, but he also made sure his delivery, his subject matter, everything he was doing in his verses was on point for the most part of it. But what stood out to most people the most on that project was the production style and how elegant and how beautiful the production sounded on that album, and that was mostly because of the producer, Madlib. Yes, the same Madlib that teamed up with MF Doom to produce the collaboration group Madvillain and the collaboration album Madvillainy, which was an outstanding project. Not everything Madlib produces turns to gold, but it was fortunate that Freddie Gibbs was able to work with him and combine both of their personalities to create such a beautiful, masterful album known as Pinata. So that's mostly what made people turn heads to Freddie Gibbs. That's why people were like, whoa, he actually has more than meets the eye, because when he's matched up with extremely good production, he can shine extremely bright. However, on this album, he is going solo once again. This isn't him teaming up with another hit producer. However, now that we've seen what he's capable of, and there's some shined light on the themes that he can include outside of him talking about the hood, we're all extremely impressed, and I especially want to hear where he's going to go with this album. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I am going to listen to Shadow of a Doubt by Freddie Gibbs, and then afterwards I am going to tell you guys just how I feel about it. Okay guys, so I got around listening to this thing a couple times, been mulling it over since this morning, and I've come to the conclusion that the main issue this album has is when Gibbs decides to take artistic liberties, and they just fall short of quality, or they just don't turn out in his best interest. I mean, I was really vibing the hell out of To a Majority, especially the first half of this album. Like, I was damn near ready to call this album of the month and, like, a fucking awesome hip-hop album. But then when he decided to go a little artistical, it really just did not work out all that good for him. Prime example, Basketball Wives. I mean, I was on my knees ready to just shed some tears listening to that song because he honestly sounded like he was trying to do something different, but in doing that, he came off so... it was horrible. It was a terrible experience for me. He was trying to sing, but at the same time, he included Autotune into his singing, and God knows that just did not work out for Gibbs, especially with the kind of voice he has. No, it did not work. On that track, he really sounded like he was trying to sound like Future for some odd reason. Like, honestly, his voice almost matched the likes of Future, the type of crooning he was trying to give to us, but for Gibbs, it's not passable. It doesn't work like that. Luckily, that was the only spot on the album that was just pure unlistenable for me, but there were other spots that I just didn't find all that interesting either. And to my surprise, too, the songs that weren't all that interesting also happened to be around the same time of the album, which was the middle point. On the track Mexico, I wasn't all that fond of Tory Lanez and the hook. It was kind of auto-tuned, and I didn't think it was a good fit, but I was still riding with his lyrics and the flow of the song. It was an okay track, but it wasn't anything special. Anything was a low point if the album carried out the same heights that it had. But then we went on to Packages, where it sounded like he was getting too much into the trap feel. He can do trap music well if he does a good blend. For instance, Careless, but on this song, Packages, it sounded like he went to the extreme with the trap vibe, and also was dumbing down his lyrics too. It sounded like a very simplistic song about packaging and protecting the drugs, and which is something we've known Gibbs to do, so the fact that he took that idea and kind of dumbed it down for us in this really trap feel for it, it just didn't work all that much for me. It was really starting to be like, that was the track where I was like, this is a little annoying. I mean, I don't know if this is really what you should be doing, Gibbs. And then 10 Times, which... oh, jeez. I mean, it wasn't a terrible track, but if I wanted a track like this, I would just go back to listen to Neighborhood Hose with 2 Chainz off of Cold Day in Hell. Gibbs wasn't terrible, but Gucci Mane, I can't stand Gucci Mane. I just can't really stand Gucci Mane. And on this verse especially, he didn't offer anything special. He was pretty lame. Luckily, E40 comes in, and because this is his lane, he's the guy to talk about bitches. He swept the song off its feet. He finished it strong, which made the track okay, but overall, it was kind of a poor concept considering it didn't have all that much to it. I mean, the refrain was 10 times out of 10, she a 10, and I want to fuck her friend. So, I mean, how much creative can you get with that? Not by much. Really, all you can do is put an E40 verse on there and hope for the best. And then the next track, Lately, now this song wasn't terrible either. It had a decent concept about how his friends are starting to turn on him, or the people he thought were his friends, because they just want to get closer to him for his riches, kind of like what hoes do, like gold diggers. And that wasn't a terrible concept, but it just was pretty dull of a track. It had a slow beat, it had a slow production, overall, it just wasn't all that interesting, it didn't keep my interest, and then after that, we got Basketball Wives, so those chain of songs, Mexico wasn't terrible, but when it leaned into these mellow, kind of dull, and at times not withstandable tracks, I was very disappointed. I was about to cry because the first couple tracks on here, they were actually really fucking good. I mean, really, take your pick of the first couple songs that you want. Each one is going to come jam-packed with a cool concept, a dope beat, and some keen, almost spacious production. It sounded really cool. I thought he was going to shoot for like a very spacious production-wise throughout the album, considering the fact that it kind of fit with the whole Shadow theme. But he kind of dismissed that as the album progressed. Like I said, those couple tracks that he didn't like. But take your pick the first couple tracks, because each of them are good. Like, all of them come jam-packed with great aspects to them. Rear View had a nice hard beat to it. It was definitely a gripping intro, and the fact that there was like a background, like a very low-pitched background voice, that was his voice mimicking all his lyrics, it added some real cool effect to it. Careless had a nice beat, a nice melody, conscious lyrics, and on top of that, it was extremely catchy. It was a really awesome song. It's one of my favorite songs off of here. And McDuck, too. I loved how he was talking about how in this state of his life, he's really rich, he has all the riches, but he feels like almost a spot of emptiness considering the fact that there's no longer hood violence in his life anymore. He doesn't have to deal with that, but he still feels empty, like a war veteran, you know? You're attached to that war life. It's hard to come to this new life, this calmer, more subtle life. So just because the beginning went really hard with his beats and had a nice production style and Gibbs went in, and the middle just wasn't all that good, does that necessarily mean this album was bad? I mean, no, because the album had a decent finish. I mean, Freddie Gordy was one of the best tracks on here, and that was at the latter half of this album, considering the fact that, yes, it was a tale about his upbringings, about how he had to struggle to get to where he is, but at the same time talked about how he struggled with drugs and how he had to get past his own personal problems before he could succumb to getting successful. He had not only to get out of the hood and become a successful rapper that he wanted to be, but he also had to kick the drug addictions that he had, and also the attachment that he had to the dope-dealing life. So if Gibbs didn't give us a poor middle section, I would say the only flaw this album has is the fact that sometimes the concepts are reiterating what he's already mentioned in the same album. He's talking about his upbringings and the state of living that he has today. Like I said, Freddie Gordy was a really good track, but it also sounded similar thematically to Forever and a Day. So there's some tracks that kind of sound similar to each other, but the fact that he had a very weak middle section, that made that the worst part of this album, whereas everything else, once you hear them, it's like, oh, thank God we're back on the really good beats, good production, Gibbs is on his A game, he's not dumbing himself down anymore, he's not trying to be this person that he's not. Which is why I'm able to look past the fact that some of these themes sound similar to other ones, considering the fact that I was just thankful to hear them, and Gibbs was still trying to put in his effort even when there were some bad artistical choices. So I really respect the man for trying really hard to do something a little different than what we're used to Gibbs doing, like singing and some other stuff, like some more trap-flavored beats. But in the end, it just didn't work out in his favor, and it actually ended up making this album a little not as good as it could have been. Don't get me wrong, there is still a hella good beats and hella good production on this thing, especially in the beginning. Like, I'm talking, Rear View all the way through McDuck, like those were fantastic songs, and I thought this was going to be album of the month, but then it fell off pretty hard during the middle, and then it just barely picked itself up back at the end, but by that point you were kind of just over it. So it's a pretty good project, but the problem is it just falls short of being a great project because of the flaws that it has. If you're a Freddie Gibbs fan, you might be able to look past these flaws and just enjoy the album in its entirety. So yes, go ahead and listen to this thing. It's still pretty damn good. And if you're just a hip-hop fan, it's still worth listening because there's some good stuff on here. And hey, if you like R&B crooning and maybe some Autotune, like if you're heavy into Future, you might actually enjoy some of the spots I didn't, like Basketball Wives. It just wasn't my cup of tea and it didn't fit the album for me. So decent album, it deserves recognition, but it could have been better than it is, and that is all I got for you guys. If you would like to like or subscribe, that'd be awesome. I'd honestly really appreciate it, and Till next time, Soulless Reviews.